By then, Byrd had completed 2 successful trips to Antarctica. He was well on his way to being considered a legendary explorer.
He was the first person to fly across the South Pole.
For 77 years, the secrets of Admiral Richard Byrd's Antarctic expeditions remained locked in the memories of those who lived through them. However, in April 2023, when Chief Petty Officer Robert Johnson passed away at the age of 102, the world lost its final link to one of the most mysterious chapters in the history of polar exploration. However, before his death, Johnson, the last surviving member of Byrd's legendary expeditions.
One time a person asked me, said, would you like to go back to the Antarctic? I told him, what do you think? I'm in Florida, where it's warm here.
Finally broke his silence about what happened in those frozen wastelands. What he revealed has sent shockwaves through the scientific community and changed everything we thought we knew about Antarctica. From classified military operations to encounters that defied explanation, Johnson's testimony reveals a story so extraordinary that it took nearly 8 decades for him to find the courage to tell it. The truth about the Admiral Byrd expedition isn't just shocking, it's world-changing. The man who conquered both poles. Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd Jr. wasn't just another explorer. He was a legend who redefined what it meant to push the boundaries of human endurance and discovery. Born in 1888 into a prominent Virginia family, Byrd had already claimed to be the first person to fly over the North Pole in 1926, making him a household name across America and earning him the Congressional Medal of Honor. His piercing blue eyes and commanding presence made him the perfect poster boy for American exploration. But beneath his polished exterior lay a man consumed by an insatiable hunger for the unknown. It was this relentless drive that would lead him to Antarctica. Time and again, each expedition more secretive than the last. But it was his obsession with Antarctica that would define his legacy and ultimately lead to some of the most classified operations in naval history. Byrd's first Antarctic expedition in 1928 had established him as the foremost polar explorer of his generation, but it had also revealed something that would haunt him for the rest of his career. The pristine white continent held secrets that went far beyond geographical discovery, secrets that would require the highest levels of military clearance and governmental oversight to pursue. When young Robert Johnson first met Admiral Byrd in 1939, he was just a 19-year-old Sea Scout from San Diego, eager for adventure and completely unprepared for the secrets he would carry for the rest of his life. Johnson had volunteered for what he believed would be a straightforward scientific expedition, drawn by stories of heroic exploration and the promise of serving his country. The meeting took place in a dimly lit naval facility in Norfolk, Virginia, where Byrd personally interviewed each potential expedition member. Johnson later recalled the intensity of that first encounter. Admiral Byrd looked right through me, like he could see into my soul. He asked me strange questions, not about my sailing experience or survival skills, but about my ability to keep secrets and my loyalty to the United States. Byrd saw something special in Johnson, a quiet determination and unwavering loyalty that would make him the perfect witness to history's most extraordinary polar expedition. Unlike many of the other volunteers who boasted about their adventures and qualifications, Johnson possessed a rare combination of competence and discretion that Byrd recognized as essential for what lay ahead. The Admiral had learned from his previous expeditions that the most dangerous discoveries weren't the ones that killed you. They were the ones that challenged everything humanity thought it knew about the world. Little did Johnson know that he was about to become part of a mission that would challenge everything humanity believed about the bottom of the world. The Admiral Byrd expedition wasn't just about exploration. It was about uncovering truths that governments around the world weren't ready to accept. As Johnson would later reveal, Byrd's expeditions were driven by discoveries so profound that they had to be kept secret from the general public for decades. The stakes were nothing less than the fundamental understanding of human civilization itself. The frozen fortress of secrets. Antarctica in the 1940s was more than just a frozen continent. It was a blank canvas of mystery that held secrets powerful enough to shift the balance of global power. The vast expanse of ice and snow stretched endlessly in every direction, creating a landscape so alien and forbidding that it seemed like another planet entirely. Yet beneath this desolate surface lay treasures that nations would kill for. Uranium deposits, coal reserves, and mineral wealth that could fuel industrial empires for centuries. When Admiral Byrd launched his multiple expeditions between 1928 and 1956, the world was on the brink of the Cold War, and every nation understood that controlling Antarctica meant controlling vast, untapped resources and strategic advantages that could determine the fate of civilizations. The geopolitical implications were staggering. While the public saw these expeditions as heroic adventures in the name of science, world leaders understood the true stakes. Antarctica represented the last unclaimed territory on Earth, a continent larger than the United States and Mexico combined, sitting at the bottom of the world like a frozen crown jewel waiting to be claimed. The race to establish sovereignty over Antarctic territory had begun, and Admiral Byrd was America's champion in this high-stakes game of international chess. Robert Johnson, now speaking for the first time about his experiences, described Antarctica as a place where the impossible became possible, where the laws of nature seemed to bend in ways that challenged everything we thought we knew. His weathered hands trembled as he recalled those early days, when he was young and fearless, unprepared for the psychological toll of witnessing phenomena that defied explanation. The continent had a way of changing people, he explained, of forcing them to question fundamental assumptions about reality itself. Johnson's voice carried the weight of decades when he described the eerie silence that could drive men mad, broken only by the haunting sounds of ice shifting and cracking under pressures that seemed to come from deep within the earth. The harsh conditions weren't just about surviving temperatures that could kill a man in minutes. They were about navigating a landscape that seemed to defy conventional understanding. Johnson described areas where compasses spun wildly, where the aurora australis danced in patterns that seemed almost intelligent, and where the ice itself appeared to pulse with an inner light that couldn't be explained by any known scientific principles. These weren't just the hallucinations of men pushed to their physical and mental limits. They were consistent observations recorded by multiple expedition members, each account more disturbing than the last. During the 1939 to 1941 United States Antarctic Service expedition, Johnson witnessed phenomena that military officials immediately classified as top secret. The vast ice sheets weren't just frozen water. They were hiding geological formations, underground caverns, and discoveries that would revolutionize our understanding of Earth's history. Johnson's most haunting memory was of standing at the edge of a crevasse that seemed to descend into the Earth's core, with walls that glowed with an otherworldly phosphorescence and temperatures that were impossibly warm for their Antarctic location. Johnson's revelations about these early expeditions paint a picture of a continent that was far more complex and mysterious than anyone had imagined. The Admiral Byrd expedition had stumbled upon something that would change the course of polar exploration forever, transforming Antarctica from a scientific curiosity into humanity's most closely guarded secret. Operation High Jump. To the public, Operation High Jump was a test run, a glorified training mission in the most extreme environment on Earth. But to those who were there, and to those who later studied the classified records, one thing was clear. This was never just an exercise. The scale of Operation High Jump was absurd for a scientific mission. 13 ships, including the aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea, 33 aircraft, over 4,000 men, naval infantry, armored vehicles, and heavy weaponry. You don't bring that kind of firepower to study penguins, and you don't name it high jump unless you're expecting a sudden vertical threat. The U.S. government claimed it was all about survival training, but according to the Arctic Institute and Cold War Defense Archives, Antarctica had quietly become a chessboard, a new strategic frontier. If one superpower established a permanent base there, it could change the global balance. But the real fear was the possibility that someone else already had. After World War II, rumors spread that Nazi forces had fled to hidden locations, including underground Antarctic bases. Though these stories were often dismissed, intelligence reports show that U-boats were, in fact, tracked traveling toward the Southern Ocean. One even surrendered months after Germany had fallen near Argentina. Chief Robert Johnson remembered the tension clearly. There was a feeling on board, not fear, but alertness. We were on edge. We weren't told everything, but we knew there was more at stake than just the weather. When Byrd's team landed, their mission objectives expanded overnight. Surveillance runs increased. Some ground teams were ordered into areas previously marked as unstable. One such team, Johnson said, was sent into a mountainous region where the snow didn't behave naturally. It would melt in patterns, like something warm was underneath. Not geothermal, but different and controlled. That team never came back. After their disappearance, high jump was terminated almost immediately. Officially, the reason given was severe weather and logistical fatigue. But multiple officers, including Byrd himself, had privately warned that the conditions were unmanageable. Some reports even mentioned engagements, hostile encounters, though no names were listed. When Byrd returned, he was a different man. He was quiet and guarded. His post-expedition report was heavily redacted, and some of it was classified for over 60 years. The Navy called it routine. Johnson later claimed that one night, back on the ship, Byrd confided in him, "We saw something out there that we weren't supposed to, and now we can't go back." That comment haunted Johnson for decades. What did Byrd mean? What couldn't they go back to? And who or what were they interfering with? One thing was certain. This wasn't just a Cold War precaution. It wasn't about terrain or tactics. It was a test, a confrontation, and possibly a warning. Because Antarctica wasn't empty, not entirely anyway, what Operation High Jump revealed or provoked was something no one could explain, and no government wanted to admit. Not then, not ever. Until now. The Lost Files and the Silent Years. After Operation High Jump ended abruptly in early 1947, it was like a curtain dropped over everything. There were no documentaries, no presidential statements, and no follow-up missions for over a decade. It was just silence. Admiral Byrd gave one final press conference in South America and then disappeared from public view. His tone had shifted. He looked tired. Some say frightened. In that now infamous interview, he warned of a new enemy that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Back then, it vanished. The clip was buried. Transcripts were altered. And just like that, Byrd's strange statement became nothing more than a Cold War footnote, erased before it ever made the newsreels. Why? It turns out not everything about Operation High Jump was declassified. In fact, large portions of the mission logs, aerial footage, and satellite records from the U.S. Navy were never released to the public. According to Freedom of Information Act filings, multiple reports were lost in transport, destroyed in archive floods, or simply marked as classified indefinitely. Chief Robert Johnson remembered some of those missing reports because he saw them. There were photographs, he recalled, aerial shots we took on a clear day, no clouds, no storms. There were structures, geometric patterns in the ice, doors even, massive doors, but those photos were gone. Other records went missing too. Flight logs for the lost aircraft, incident reports, and even entire team manifests. Some crew members' names were removed from final personnel lists, almost like they'd never been there at all. Between 1947 and Byrd's death in 1957, he never led another Antarctic mission of that scale. He gave brief public interviews, usually discussing weather patterns or base construction. But anytime someone asked about Operation High Jump, he changed the subject. The government remained tight-lipped as well. Antarctica, once a Cold War flashpoint, was suddenly off the strategic radar. The 1959 Antarctic Treaty was signed, turning the entire continent into a zone for peaceful scientific exploration. No weapons, no military operations, and no questions asked. To Johnson, that treaty was a smokescreen. They wanted to seal it off, he said, make it untouchable because whatever we found, they couldn't let anyone else find it too. In the decades that followed, Johnson watched the world forget. He watched Byrd's legacy turn into textbook history. He watched conspiracy theories pop up, only to be laughed away. But he never laughed because he was there, and he remembered how carefully the truth was buried. Sometimes, he said, it felt like living in two timelines. the one the world believed, and the one he lived through. The hardest part wasn't the silence, he admitted. It was knowing the silence was manufactured. For 78 years he said nothing, not because he was afraid, but because no one was ready until now. The last man standing. For decades, Chief Robert Johnson was just a name, one of thousands of enlisted men who served during the Cold War. But when the final roster of Operation High Jump veterans was quietly published in the 1990s, one thing stood out. Johnson was the last one left. Born in 1924 in Norfolk, Virginia, Johnson enlisted in the Navy at 18. He was practical, loyal, and, by all accounts, unremarkable. That's probably why he was chosen. Men like him didn't ask questions. They followed orders. But after Operation High Jump, Johnson changed. He stayed in the Navy for another 2 decades, then retired and disappeared into civilian life. No memoirs, no interviews, and no military reunions. It was as if his greatest adventure never happened. He lived quietly, worked in logistics, and never brought up Antarctica, not even to his family, until his 99th birthday. That's when he decided to speak. "I'm not trying to prove anything," he said in a recorded interview from his home in Virginia. "I'm just trying to leave the truth behind." The truth he told wasn't wild or sensational. He didn't talk about aliens or flying saucers, but what he did share matched dozens of fragments from declassified files and filled in the blanks no historian ever could. He described the strange humming beneath the ice, the patrol that disappeared. The night Byrd walked into the communications tent, looking like he'd seen a ghost, refusing to log a flight path he'd just taken. Johnson even recalled being part of a small security detail that was ordered to guard a geothermal structure, not a natural one. It had stairs. "In the middle of a glacier," Johnson said, shaking his head. "They told us it was part of an old weather station, but I know concrete when I see it." He remembered one officer panicking and trying to take pictures. The camera was confiscated. The officer was discharged days later. "He didn't even get to pack his bag," Johnson said. "They flew him out immediately." After Byrd's final press conference, Johnson was reassigned to a stateside communications post. He tried to forget, but the things he saw in Antarctica never really left him. When the internet age came and videos and conspiracy theories started circulating, he watched them all. Most were nonsense, he said, but a few of them got close, he admitted. "So why speak now?" Johnson's eyes welled up when asked. "Because people deserve to know, and because I'm tired of carrying someone else's silence. I didn't sign up to be a liar." His weathered voice echoed with decades of restraint. But what did he reveal? Something hidden beneath the ice that changed everything they thought. What did he reveal? Something hidden beneath the ice that changed everything they thought they knew. Someone wanted it to stay buried. Until Johnson said, "It's time to tell everything." The survivor finally speaks. It had been nearly 80 years since Operation High Jump. But when Chief Robert Johnson sat down in front of the camera, hands trembling slightly, voice weathered by time, the room went silent. He wasn't reading from notes. He didn't need to. "The Admiral and I," he began, "we weren't friends. But that last night he looked me in the eye and said, 'You were there. You know what we saw.' And he told me to never forget. And he hadn't." Johnson then leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as if reliving it all. "There was a mission within the mission," he said. "Not everyone knew. Maybe 24 of us tops were flown out in small teams, not recorded in official logs, and dropped near areas that had already been surveyed by planes. But the coordinates didn't make sense." What Johnson described next was chilling. "We landed near what looked like just a massive ridge of ice. Nothing special. But it was warm. Not just a little. I mean, radiating heat. And there was a vibration, like the air was humming." The team was ordered to investigate. What they found was a fissure, narrow but clearly unnatural. The snow around it had melted in geometric patterns. The opening led into a tunnel, part ice, part something else. It wasn't rock and it wasn't metal. It was like both. Smooth, curved, almost as if engineered. They were told not to enter, but one officer did. He never came back. When the second man went in with a line tied to his waist, he was pulled back out, unconscious, face pale, eyes open but unblinking. He never spoke again, Johnson said. Not a word. He was medically discharged. Last I heard, he was committed to a facility in Maryland. Johnson's team was then evacuated. The area was bombed days later under the guise of a test. But the timing, Johnson says, wasn't a coincidence. They were covering it up. Whatever we saw, it wasn't supposed to exist. When asked if he believed it was extraterrestrial, Johnson paused. I don't know, he said slowly. It could have been something ancient. Maybe something we didn't build but found. Whatever it wasn't natural. And it wasn't ours. He said Admiral Byrd confided in him the night before the mission was shut down. Byrd was shaking, pacing, and talking about the implications. He said, "This changes everything we think we know about this world." Then he just stopped talking. After that, Byrd followed orders, and Johnson followed silence. But now, nearing the end of his life, he couldn't stay quiet. "I don't care if people believe me," he said, "but I was there, and so were others. Most of them are gone now, but I'm not. And I promised him I wouldn't forget, and I haven't." Legacy of the Truth. Operation High Jump faded from public memory almost as quickly as it ended. A few historians mentioned it in passing. A few documentaries brushed over the surface. But the story, the real story, was buried beneath decades of silence, secrecy, and snow. And now, Chief Robert Johnson is the last voice standing. His confession is a reminder of how far governments will go to keep a secret, and how deeply a single truth can haunt a man's life. Johnson never claimed to have all the answers. He never tried to sell his story. In fact, he only agreed to share it with a small team of researchers and a single camera, quietly funded by a historical truth archive. No media, no sponsors, and no agenda. Just the truth. "When I look back," he said, "I don't think we were meant to understand what we found. We weren't ready then. Maybe we're not even ready now. Maybe that's the real heart of the mystery, not what they saw, but what it meant. Was it alien? Ancient? A lost civilization? Or just the first glimpse of technology far beyond our understanding? Whatever it was, it scared Admiral Byrd. It silenced a naval task force. And it left a quiet young sailor with a burden that stayed on his shoulders for nearly 80 years. Chief Johnson's final words weren't dramatic. They were honest. People think the Cold War was fought with bombs and spies, but I saw another kind of war. One no one wrote about. One that's still hidden. That's the part that should scare us the most. Today, Antarctica remains sealed by international treaties. There are no military bases and no resource extraction, just science and flags. Johnson believed that it was no coincidence. "They're not protecting the land," he said. "They're protecting what's under it." The legacy of Operation High Jump isn't just in naval records or lost flight logs. It's in the invisible line between what we're told and what we're never allowed to know. It's in the eyes of a man who waited nearly a century to tell the world what he saw, and still questioned whether he should. It's in the silence of Admiral Byrd, whose final years were spent in near total privacy, his most famous expedition reduced to whispers and half-truths. Now, that silence is broken.